Lookout Point offers panoramic views of 3 valleys. It's a popular sunset spot. But rangers won't discuss what's found there. Every morning, rangers remove objects from Lookout Point, compasses pointing south. Watches stopped at 3:17 a.m. Photographs of the lookout, taken from angles that don't exist. And letters. Dozens of letters, addressed to people who vanished in the forest decades ago. Written in fresh ink. Dated yesterday. Rangers collect them, bag them, file them. But they won't discuss who's leaving them, or how the letters know things about the missing that were never made public. Lookout Point is standard forest infrastructure. An elevated platform constructed in 1962, wooden deck, metal railings, 3 benches, emergency radio box mounted to the support post. Popular with hikers for the view. 3 valleys visible simultaneously: Cedar Valley West, Maple Valley North, Ridge Valley Northeast. Clear day visibility, 40 miles. Rangers patrol Lookout Point twice daily. Morning sweep at dawn, evening check at dusk. The morning sweep isn't for hikers. It's for collection. Because every night, objects appear at Lookout Point, not left by hikers, not placed by visitors during operating hours. They appear overnight, after the evening check, before the dawn sweep. Always in the same location, the northeastern bench, the one facing Ridge Valley. And the objects follow a pattern. Compasses. Always pointing south, regardless of actual magnetic north. Needles fixed. Immobile. As if south has become an absolute direction independent of Earth's magnetic field. Watches. Always stopped at 3:17 a.m. Different makes, different models, different years, but all frozen at that exact moment. Digital watches display 3:17. Analog watches point to 3:17 precisely. Photographs, printed on standard photo paper, showing Lookout Point from perspectives that shouldn't exist. Aerial views from above, but higher than any helicopter flies. Ground-level shots from the valley floor, but Lookout Point isn't visible from those distances. Angles that would require the camera to be positioned in mid-air, suspended, impossible. And letters, handwritten, fresh ink, dated with yesterday's date. Addressed to people who disappeared in the forest between 1967 and 1998. Rangers don't discuss the objects publicly. Don't mention them in incident reports. Don't log them in standard documentation. They have a separate protocol, unofficial, verbal transmission only. Every morning, the Dawn Patrol Ranger collects the objects, places them in evidence bags, labels them with date and time, stores them in a locked cabinet in the ranger station basement. The cabinet has been accumulating objects since 1999. 24 years of compasses, watches, photographs, and letters. And the collection grows every night. Tonight, we follow 3 accounts, each describing encounters with the objects, each ending with impossible knowledge and temporal confusion, and each revealing that the objects aren't being left at Lookout Point. They're appearing there, manifesting, materializing, crossing from somewhere else into our location. And the letters, the dozens of letters written to the vanished, contain information that shouldn't exist. Details about their final moments that were never documented, descriptions of what they saw before they disappeared, knowledge that only the missing themselves could possess, as if someone is writing to them from the other side, from wherever they went, from the perspective they reached before vanishing. And Lookout Point is where those messages arrive. The first account comes from Ranger David Reese, an 11-year veteran who conducted morning patrols and believed every mystery had a rational explanation. Reese was practical, skeptical, the kind of ranger who investigated strange reports thoroughly, documented evidence meticulously, and never accepted supernatural explanations. On June 8, 2019, Reese arrived at Lookout Point for the dawn sweep at 5:47 a.m. Standard protocol. Check the area, collect any objects, log and bag them. He found 7 items on the northeastern bench. 2 compasses, both pointing south, needles locked. One was a modern orienteering compass. The other was a brass antique from the 1940s. Both completely functional except for the fixed direction. 1 watch, digital, Casio brand. Display frozen at 3:17, battery full, but the time wouldn't advance. 3 photographs, printed on glossy paper, fresh. No weather damage despite being outdoors overnight. The first photo showed lookout point from directly above, aerial view, but the angle was wrong. Too high for a drone, too low for a plane, and the image was perfectly vertical, as if the camera had been positioned 200 feet directly overhead, hovering, motionless. The second photo showed lookout point from the valley floor. Ground-level perspective from Cedar Valley, 3 miles west. But lookout point wasn't visible from Cedar Valley. The ridge blocked the view. Yet the photograph clearly showed the platform, the benches, the radio box. Impossible perspective from an impossible location. The third photo showed lookout point at night, but the lighting was wrong. Not moonlight, not starlight. The platform was illuminated by a sourceless glow, bright even, coming from no particular direction, as if the location itself was luminous. Reese examined the photographs. No evidence of digital manipulation. Genuine photo paper. Actual prints, not inkjet. As if someone had used a traditional camera and darkroom. But the perspectives were impossible. Then he found the letter. Standard white envelope. Addressed in careful handwriting. Michael Torres, CO Lookout Point. Michael Torres had disappeared in 1987 while hiking alone in Ridge Valley. Search teams found his backpack, his water bottle, his trail map, but never his body. The case remained unsolved, filed as missing, presumed dead, 32 years ago. Reese opened the envelope. The letter was dated June 7, 2019, yesterday. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. The ink, fresh enough to smudge when touched. The letter read, Michael, you were right about the trees. They do move when you're not watching. Not much. Just enough to change the trail. Just enough to make the path loop. You walked for 6 hours thinking you were heading west. But the trees kept adjusting, kept bending your path. Until you were walking in circles. Until you couldn't tell which direction was which anymore. At 3:17 a.m. you stopped, put down your pack, sat on that fallen log, and you saw it, the thing that lives in the gaps between the trees, the thing that reorganizes the forest. You tried to run, but there's no running from something that controls the space you're running through. I'm writing to tell you that it's still there, still bending the trails, still adjusting the trees, and Lookout Point is where the trails all converge now. Where all the bent paths eventually lead. The others are here too, 37 of us. We watch from the angles that don't exist, from the perspectives outside normal space. And we can see you, all of you, standing at Lookout Point, looking at the valleys. But you can't see us. Not yet. Not until 3:17 a.m. The letter wasn't signed. Reese felt his hands start shaking, not from fear yet, but from holding a letter dated yesterday, written to a man who'd been missing for 32 years, describing details about his disappearance that had never been in any report. The official record stated Torres was last seen at 2 p.m. on a sunny afternoon. His gear was found scattered over a quarter-mile area, suggesting he'd been moving quickly, no indication he'd been lost. No mention of nighttime activity. But this letter described him hiking at 3:17 a.m., described specific observations, trees moving, paths looping, described a thing in the gaps between trees. None of that was in any file. Either this letter was an elaborate hoax by someone with access to classified information, or It was written by someone who'd actually witnessed Torres's disappearance. Someone who'd been there, who'd seen what happened, who knew details that weren't documented because no one survived to report them. Reese bagged the letter, collected the other objects, returned to the ranger station. He pulled Torres's file, read through every report, every search log, every witness statement. Nothing matched the letter's details. But three things stood out. Torres's watch had been found with his gear, stopped at 3:17 a.m. The search team's compasses had malfunctioned in Ridge Valley, all pointing south regardless of position. And a search dog had refused to track past a specific point, 3 miles into Ridge Valley. The handler noted the dog showed extreme fear response to location with no visible threat. Reese radioed his supervisor. "I need to discuss the lookout point collection." Patricia Vance responded immediately, in person, not over radio. They met in her office. Vance closed the door, drew the blinds. "You read the letter," she said, not a question. "Dated yesterday, written to Michael Torres. Describes his disappearance in detail, details that aren't in our files." "They're never in our files," Vance said quietly. "The letters always contain information we don't have. That's why we collect them. That's why we don't discuss them." "Who's writing them?" "We don't know, but we have theories. The leading theory, the one that fits all the evidence, is that the letters are written by the missing, written from wherever they are, wherever people go when they vanish in Ridge Valley." Reese felt his throat close. That's impossible. The compasses point south when magnetic north is clearly northwest. The watches all stop at 3:17, despite having different mechanisms. The photographs show perspectives that can't exist. Which part of this is possible? So you're saying, what? Torres is alive somewhere, writing letters? Not alive, not in the conventional sense, but present, aware, observing, and able to send messages back to Lookout Point. Because Lookout Point is the convergence. The place where all the bent trails lead. The location that exists in both our space and, she paused, wherever they are. How long has this been happening? The object started appearing in 1999, 12 years after Torres disappeared, 14 years after the vanishings began. We don't know why it started then, but we've collected 447 objects over 20 years. Compasses, watches, photographs, and letters. All following the same pattern. All appearing overnight on the northeastern bench. And the letters are all to the missing? Every single one. 37 people vanished in Ridge Valley between 1967 and 1998. We've received letters addressed to all 37. Some get more letters than others. Torres has received 43. Sarah Chen has received 68. Jennifer Hayes has received 112. Reese processed this. Who's writing to them? Vance met his eyes. We think they're writing to each other, the missing writing to the missing. Communicating across whatever space they inhabit. And Lookout Point is where the messages surface, where they cross back into our reality. The second account comes from Dr. Marcus Webb, a physicist who specialized in spatial anomalies and refused to believe that messages could transmit between dimensions. On September 3, 2020, Webb obtained authorization to study the Lookout Point objects with university-grade analysis equipment. He examined 200 letters from the collection, subjected them to every available test: ink analysis, paper composition, handwriting evaluation, content analysis. His findings were disturbing. The ink was standard ballpoint pen ink, available at any store. Chemical composition showed no anomalies. But the ink's age contradicted the paper's age. The paper was fresh, manufactured within the last year based on fiber analysis and chemical markers. But the ink showed degradation consistent with 20-year-old writing, molecular breakdown, oxidation patterns, aging that required decades. Fresh paper. Old ink. Written yesterday according to the dates, but chemically aged as if written in 1999. The handwriting showed consistent patterns across letters, 37 distinct handwriting styles, each matching one of the missing persons when compared to their historical documents. Michael Torres's letters matched his signature from his 1987 hiking permit. Sarah Chen's letters matched her handwriting from her 1991 incident report. Jennifer Hayes's letters matched her journal entries from 1998. Either 37 different people were perfectly forging the handwriting of the vanished, or the vanished were actually writing the letters. Webb moved to content analysis. He cataloged every piece of information mentioned in the letters, cross-referenced it with official reports. 73% of the information in the letters had never been documented publicly. Details about the missing persons, final hours that no one could know, observations they'd made, decisions they'd considered, thoughts they'd had. Private information. Impossible information. Information that could only come from the individuals themselves. Webb documented everything, prepared a comprehensive report, concluded that the letters represented an unknown communication mechanism between isolated spatial regions. Then he decided to test the mechanism directly. On September 12, 2020, Webb spent the night at Lookout Point, alone, with observation equipment, planning to document exactly when and how the objects appeared. He set up motion-activated cameras, infrared sensors, electromagnetic field detectors, positioned them around the northeastern bench. At 11:47 p.m., he was alone at Lookout Point, no objects on the bench. At 3:17 a.m., every sensor activated simultaneously. The cameras showed nothing, no movement, no person approaching, no objects being placed. But the infrared sensors detected a massive temperature drop. The air around the bench dropped 42 degrees in 3 seconds. The electromagnetic sensors registered a spike, localized field distortion centered on the bench. And when Webb checked the bench at 3:18 a.m., 9 objects had appeared. 3 compasses, 2 watches, 3 photographs, 1 letter. Not placed, not carried, not dropped. Manifested, materialized, crossed into existence between 3 hours 17 minutes and 0 seconds a.m. and 3 hours 17 minutes and 59 seconds a.m. Webb examined the objects with shaking hands. The letter was addressed to him. Dr. Marcus Webb, C.O. Lookout Point. Dated September 12, 2020. Written in his own handwriting. He opened it. Marcus. Don't try to understand it. You can't. Your physics assumes continuous space, assumes distance is fixed, assumes locations don't overlap. But at 3:17 a.m., Lookout Point exists in both spaces simultaneously. For 1 minute, 60 seconds, that's when the messages can cross. When we can send them back. I'm writing this from 3 hours ahead of you, from the version of September 12th, where I already made the mistake you're about to make. At 3:19 a.m., you're going to see something on the northeastern bench, a figure, sitting where the objects appear. You're going to approach it. You're going to try to communicate. Don't. Whatever you see isn't in your space. It's in ours. And if you interact with it, if you touch it, speak to it, acknowledge it, you create a connection, a link, a way for the space to pull you through. I know you won't listen. I didn't. At 3:19 a.m., 3 hours ago from where I am now, I approached the figure, I reached out, and the space bent. I'm writing this from inside the bend, from the angle that doesn't exist, from the perspective outside normal space. There are 37 of us here now. 38 counting me. We watch Lookout Point from positions that aren't on Earth. We see the 3 valleys from viewpoints suspended in nothing. We exist in the gaps between locations. And at 3:17 a.m. every night, for 60 seconds, we can send messages back. This is my first message. My last message. The only message I'll be able to send before the space fully claims me. Don't approach the figure. Don't create the connection. Leave lookout point. Now. Before 3:19. You have 2 minutes. Marcus Webb, written September 13, 2020, 3:17 a.m. from outside. Webb looked at his watch. 3:17 a.m. He looked at the northeastern bench. A figure sat there, shadowed, indistinct, facing Ridge Valley. Webb felt his vision tunnel, his chest tighten. His hands go numb. The figure was him. His build, his posture, his jacket. Sitting on the bench, perfectly still, as if waiting. Webb tried to back away. His legs wouldn't respond. The figure turned its head, looked directly at him. It had his face, his features, his eyes. But wrong, displaced, existing at an angle that hurt to perceive. As if the face existed in multiple positions simultaneously, overlapping, occupying space that wasn't quite aligned with reality. The figure opened its mouth, spoke in Webb's voice. You're going to approach me. You're going to reach out. You're going to create the connection. Because you need to know. You need to understand. That's why you came here. That's why you stayed until 3:17. Webb tried to speak. His throat wouldn't work. The figure stood, began walking toward him. Not across the deck, not through space. Walking through angles, through perspectives that didn't exist, moving closer while remaining in the same spot, distance becoming meaningless. At 3:18 a.m., the figure reached him, extended a hand. Webb saw his own hand reaching back, watched his arm move without conscious control, felt his fingers extend toward the figure's fingers. The moment they touched, everything bent. Rangers found Webb at dawn, standing on the northeastern bench, facing Ridge Valley, perfectly motionless. They called his name, no response. They touched his shoulder, no reaction. His eyes were open, staring, but not focusing on anything in normal space. They evacuated him, transported him to the hospital. He remained catatonic for 4 days. When he finally spoke, he could only say one thing. I'm still there. Part of me is still there. Standing on the bench, watching from the angle that doesn't exist. And at 3:17 a.m., I can see everything. All 3 valleys simultaneously from positions that aren't real. I exist in the gap now. Part in this space. Part in theirs. And I can't close the connection. The third account is the most disturbing, because it involves a ranger who read all the letters, who cataloged every message, who cross-referenced every detail mentioned by the vanished. This is the story of Ranger Patricia Vance, who spent 20 years collecting the objects, who'd read every letter sent to the missing, who believed that understanding the pattern might explain the disappearances. On October 7, 2023, Vance compiled a comprehensive database of the letters, contents. 8,447 objects collected over 24 years. 3,612 letters among them. She analyzed every letter, categorized every detail, built a timeline of what the missing had experienced. And she discovered something impossible. The letters weren't just describing past disappearances. They were predicting future ones. 7 letters written in 2019 mentioned a hiker named David Reese encountering, quote, objects that prove the space overlaps. Reese didn't join the Ranger Service until 2017. Didn't work lookout point patrols until 2019. 14 letters written in 2018 mentioned a physicist named Marcus Webb, attempting to, quote, document the manifestation moment. Webb didn't request research access until 2020, and 43 letters, written over 15 years, mentioned Patricia Vance by name, describing her collecting objects, reading letters, building a database, describing things she hadn't done yet when the letters were written. The letters weren't messages from the past. They were messages from outside time, from a perspective where past and future existed simultaneously, where the missing could observe events before they happened because they existed in a space where temporal sequence didn't apply. Vance realized what this meant. The missing weren't gone. They were displaced, moved to a location adjacent to normal space, a position from which they could observe lookout point continuously, from which they could see past, present, and future simultaneously. And they were trying to warn people. Every compass pointing south was a warning. The direction is wrong. Don't trust navigation. Every watch stopped at 3:17 was a message. That's when the space opens, when the boundary becomes permeable. Every photograph from impossible angles was proof. We can see from positions that don't exist. We're in the spaces between. And every letter was communication from people trying to prevent others from joining them. Vance checked her own file. She'd been mentioned in 43 letters, spanning 15 years, all predicting her actions, all warning her about a specific date. October 7th, 2023. Today. The letters all said the same thing. Patricia will read all the letters on October 7th, 2023. She'll understand the pattern. She'll realize we're trying to warn people. And she'll go to lookout point that night at 3:17 a.m. to try to communicate with us, to try to bring us back. Don't let her. She'll create a permanent connection. The space will pull through, and everyone at lookout point will be displaced, moved to our angle, trapped in the gap. Keep her away from lookout point on October 7th after midnight. Vance read this at 11:34 p.m. on October 7th. She was alone in the ranger station. Everyone else had gone home. And she knew, absolutely knew, that she was going to lookout point. Not because she wanted to, not because it was smart, but because the pattern demanded it, because the letters had predicted it, because she existed in a timeline where this happened. Free will was an illusion when viewed from outside time. She drove to lookout point, arrived at 2:47 a.m., walked to the northeastern bench, sat down, waited. At 3:17 a.m. the objects appeared. But this time they didn't manifest on the bench. They materialized around her, surrounding her, dozens of compasses forming a circle. Dozens of watches displayed on the railing, dozens of photographs pinned to the air itself, floating, showing her from angles that tracked her continuously. And letters, hundreds of letters, appearing in stacks, piled on the bench, covering the deck, all addressed to her. All dated October 8th, 2023. All written by her. From tomorrow. From the perspective she would occupy after crossing into the gap. Messages she would write to herself after displacement. Warnings she would send back after understanding what she'd become. Vance opened the top letter. Her own handwriting, her own words. Patricia, I'm writing this from 1 minute into your future, from 3:18 a.m., from the moment after you read these words. You can't stop it. The letters prove it already happened. We exist in the outcome. We're the evidence of what comes next. In 30 seconds you'll see us, all 38 of us, standing around the bench, displaced people, watching from angles that don't exist. You'll recognize us, Sarah Chen, Michael Torres, Marcus Webb, everyone who vanished, everyone the letters were written to. We're not ghosts, not dead, just occupying different positions, existing in spaces adjacent to yours, visible only at 3:17 a.m. when the boundaries align. And you're about to join us, not because you chose to, but because the timeline demands it, because we're already writing letters from your perspective, because the future version of you exists in our space, because you're already here from tomorrow's viewpoint. Welcome to the gap, welcome to the angle, welcome to the space where lookout point exists, in both locations simultaneously. We've been expecting you. Patricia Vance, written October 8, 2023, 3:17 a.m. from outside. Vance looked up from the letter. 38 figures surrounded the bench. Shadowed, displaced, existing at impossible angles. She recognized every face, every missing person, every vanished hiker, every name from the reports. All standing at lookout point, all watching her, all occupying positions that weren't in normal space. They spoke simultaneously, different voices, same message. You're here now. Part of you already crossed. Reading the letter created the connection. Understanding the pattern pulled you through. You exist in both spaces now. Just like Webb. Just like all of us. At 3:18 a.m., the rest of you will follow. The displacement will complete, and you'll join us permanently. Until then, until 60 more seconds, you can still warn others. Write the letter, date it yesterday, address it to someone who hasn't read the letters yet. Warn them. That's all we can do from here. Send warnings back. Send objects that prove the space overlaps. Send messages that might stop someone else from understanding too much. 42 seconds. Write the letter. Vance pulled out a pen. Found paper in her pocket. Began writing. At 3:18 a.m. she vanished. Rangers found 39 letters at Lookout Point the next morning. All dated October 7, 2023. All written in Patricia Vance's handwriting. All addressed to different people who might investigate the objects, who might try to understand the pattern, who might go to Lookout Point at 3:17 a.m. Warning them, begging them not to understand. Because understanding creates connection. Connection creates displacement. Displacement is permanent. And Lookout Point now has 39 angles that don't exist. 39 positions adjacent to normal space. 39 people watching from perspectives outside reality. All visible for 60 seconds each night. All able to send messages back. All trying to warn others. But unable to return. Because you can't return from a position that doesn't exist in normal space. You can't navigate back when direction becomes meaningless. You can't find your way home when you exist in the gap between locations. You can only watch and send warnings and hope someone reads them in time. Today, Rangers still collect objects from Lookout Point every morning. The collection has grown to include Patricia Vance's contributions, her compasses, her watches, her photographs from angles that track the viewer, her letters. Hundreds of them now, all warning people, all dated with yesterday's date. All written in fresh ink that's somehow decades old. Some Rangers believe the displaced exist in a parallel dimension. Others think they're trapped in a temporal loop. Some think they occupy a quantum superposition, present in multiple locations simultaneously, but unable to fully manifest in any single space. But all Rangers agree on one thing. Don't go to Lookout Point at 3:17 a.m. Don't try to understand the pattern in the letters. Don't read too many messages from the displaced. Because understanding creates connection. Connection creates displacement. And displacement adds one more angle to Lookout Point. One more position that doesn't exist. One more perspective outside normal space. One more person sending warnings that won't be heeded. The collection grows every night. Compasses pointing south. Watches stopped at 3:17. Photographs from impossible perspectives. And letters, always letters, written by the displaced to the displaced. Messages sent from outside. Communications from the gap. Warning us. That Lookout Point exists in two spaces simultaneously. That at 3:17 a.m. the boundary becomes permeable. That understanding too much creates the connection. And once you're connected, once you see from the angles that don't exist, you become part of the collection, part of the warning. part of the gap. Forever watching from positions that aren't real. Forever sending messages back. Forever displaced. 39 and counting.